That's it? Okay,
Yes, thank you.
good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank the kind invitation from Olga, Giovanna, Joel. It's a pleasure to participate in this session and discuss with you, present to you an overview of the Brazilian technical and regulatory aspects related to the national cybersecurity, specifically for power grid. Of course, this is specific for Brazil, but I'm work for a consulting company in Techniques Engineering. We have provided consulting service for not only for the Brazilian national independent system operator regarding cybersecurity, but also to some countries in Latin America. So the framework we are presenting, maybe it applies also to many countries in South America and all over the world. I'm also representing some working group in Brazil that are studying these aspects of cybersecurity. Many of them will present some contribution in this session and also in the B5 section about this development. But specifically is a personal view about the cybersecurity, national cybersecurity related to national grid. Well, just to give you some numbers, Brazil has a very large power system of 180 gigawatt approximately of power capacity, mainly hydro, 6%, with 13% wind and 6% solar. So it's a very clean matrix of that. This is one of reasons of pride for Brazil. In the transmission system, we have also a very differentiated set of companies, the largest one with more than 400 million euros of revenue per year, and the smallest one with just 200,000 euros of revenue. On the distribution side, we have also the largest company with 11 million consumers, and the smallest one with just 1,000 consumers. This system is covered the entire country, attending 216 million inhabitants. Just to give you one of the difficulties in Brazil, national grid is, of course, is the size of the country. We have more than 8 billion kilometers, square kilometers. When you compare with the European area, you see the size of the problem that we have to manage this such large area covered in a unique integrated national grid. Regarding the governance of the cybersecurity, of the national cybersecurity, we have a verticalized responsibility starting from the president. The state minister is responsible in the national government for defining the policy adopted for cybersecurity in all the critical infrastructure. We have an advisor specifically for that. And we have also a secretary, a national security secretary that has a department for information security that also define the national roles for cybersecurity, not only for the entire critical infrastructure. But specifically for the electrical power system, we have also verticalized governance with the national regulating agents defining the policy that is to apply for the national grid. Brazil has only one independent system operator. It's called ONS. It covers also the entire country, and this operator has regional operators in the four regions that covers the north, the Amazon region, the northeast, and the southeast, and the south, where they have also control center, regional control center. But all of them are integrated in a national control center that is on the country capital. And the ISO is responsible for the entire operation of generation, transmission, and also distribution, not at the distribution level, but interacting with all the distribution companies in the country. When you look at the national structure, it's usable to adopt some framework for analyze and also define policies. So we usually use the Purdue model. I think that it's well known by everyone that it's involved in cybersecurity. And in case of Brazil, we have adopted a 6-level framework based on the Purdue model. The upper level, level 5, is the external network that covers the entire national government and also all the critical infrastructure. At the corporate level, we have the national operator, the independent system operator. At the control center network, we have the control center of all the agents and companies that are involved in the national grid. And down to level 2, we have the station network, operating and IT network that are involved. At the process level in the station, we have only the OT network. And of course, we have the field network that also has some exposure to cybersecurity. So this is a generic framework, but it has been used successfully, not only in Brazil to analyze the policy and the regulation, but also in other countries that we have provide consulting services. What characterized this entire integrated and verticalized framework is that the huge attack surface that we exposed to all these kinds of attacks from state-sponsored criminal gangs, terrorists, external hackers, remote users that most companies now use and give access, activists, even now that we are at the election time in Brazil, so we have seen an increase in attacks in these aspects, employees, operators, maintainers, system integrators, and service providers. We have registered 403 monitored attacks in the national grid in Brazil, and 179 with data breaks. These are data from Verizon. One specific aspect of Brazil is that the open market has generated many large stations with more than 5 owners, so that we have a unique network, station and process network, but managed by 5 owners. So there is a specific governance and security aspect inside the substation, in addition to the natural attacks that they are exposed due to the technology, digital technology. So the major Brazilian regulation regarding this, we can summarize in 3 very important national standards. There are many others related to infrastructure, network, and IT process, but those 3 that I'm showing in this slide relate to specifically to the power grid. The first one is a national cybersecurity policy that was released just in December of 2021, and it defined the minimum requirements for all the actors and companies that participate in the Brazilian market. The second one, that standard covers mainly at the top level of the governance of the national grid. The next one, more important than that, is the Control Center Cybersecurity Policy that defines all the roles to be followed by the members and actors in the national grid at the upper level of each company. So it involves the control centers of all the agents and companies, and the control center of the independent system operator. And finally, this was released in April 2020. It was already implemented in all the agents in Brazil. And finally, one important document that is on the preparation. I have been consulting also with ONS about this. It is the station cybersecurity policy. It is a very difficult policy to be implemented due to the number of agents and stakeholders involved in this definition, many technological aspects that has to be addressed. Like many regulating agencies around the world use an interactive process with the market just to define and validate these rules. We are exactly at this moment, at this stage of validating these rules to send them to the national regulating agency that is expected at the end of this year or beginning of the next year to be approved. Regarding the national cybersecurity policy, the upper level of the regulation, what the regulation agency in Brazil has defined is some very minimal requirement to be attained by every member of the national grid regarding rules for avoiding attacks at the design level, rules for guaranteeing or assurance of the security, rules for detection, some invasion, rules for limitation of the effects of some penetration, rule for recovering the state of normality after full penetration, and finally, rules about what incidents are considered negligible, and also rules for total recover the system after a break. These are standard. The rule does not define specifically the countermeasure to be implemented, but require that every company has a explicit policy defined for each class of a policy that is defined on the national rule. Regarding the rules for the companies, the standard in Brazil defines several kinds of countermeasures. I usually use this classification defined by the book from Amoroso that is very interesting because it defines 10 classes of countermeasure, generic countermeasure that can be applied to all kinds of cybersecurity regulation, and it's very useful for analyzing the how much you cover with the specific regulation. I will not get in detail about all of them due to the time, just to show that they are countermeasure for deception, for hiding some functionality, for discretion, obscuring some sensitive information, for separation of functionality so that do not put all of them on the same place, for the collection of information for after incident analysis, diversification of providers of solutions, also correlation analysis, mainly after analysis of the collected information, commonality, adoption of the best practices for each kind of policy, awareness, understanding of normal status, that include the training of people to be awareness, to be of the dangers of cybersecurity. Of course, defense in depth, that is common to most of them, and response, how to recover from a successful attack. Usually, I have checked that these 10 classes of countermeasures are sufficient to cover almost all of the measures that you can include in a policy document. So it is easy to correlate these 10 classes of countermeasure with the 6 generic policy defined by the national rule, so that you can map all the specific countermeasure included by each company in its specific policy. And it is easy for not only for the independent system operator, but the regulating agencies to check and to audit what the level of protection that you are implementing in your camp. I'll not get in detail on all of this, just to show that, for example, the Brazilian Control Center cybersecurity policy that is defined on this document, ONS Role 01. It has implemented these rules that are shown in blue. So it is easy to see what kind of countermeasure, what kind of policy is not being attended by this specific policy, what kind of countermeasure is not covered by any rule in this specific standard. If you see, there is no specific countermeasure for deception, so that this rule does not define any requirement for deception to hide or to misleading the possible attack. There is not also any specific rule for diversity in this standard, so that this is a specific countermeasure that is not included in this document. So it is easy to map, and you have used it not only in Brazil, but in some countries in South America, just to evaluate and define the level of protection that the regulation covers in the entire system. This is for control center. For the internal, this is my last slide, and the most important one perhaps is to define the requirement for station communication. As we are introducing now many fully digital substations, there is concern about the cybersecurity aspect of the internal communication, mainly provided by I-625. Of course, there are many standards covering the security of I-625, but the real problem is that you can only cover the border of the substation. Internally, it's very difficult due to the frequent access, frequent changes that we do on the substation, and mainly due to the low capacity, low processing capacity of the IDs that are used for this, so that you cannot implement many kinds of, mainly cryptography cannot be implemented in this communication. So the recommendation that is being developed is to include on the disturbance recorder that is usual to have in the substation, the monitoring, the direct monitoring of all kind of messages that are being exchanged, mainly on the protection channels, so that you can include in the full distance, the disturbance records, also information about any break on the message that are exchanged. This is very easy to implement due to the SCL definition of the standard, I-625, and also if you are implementing a system based on perhaps 61331 and other standard for communication, it's very easy to get the profile of the communication and to get information about these kind of abnormality, loss of message integrity, absence of message, absence of timing signals, presence of unplanned messages, or abnormal interval between messages, or excessive latency and jitter in message. So this is very easy to implement, and it's a passive monitoring, but very important for the cyber security. Another aspect that is very important is that the national grid is moving the communication between substation to routed network. So there is, of course, a concern about latency mainly, and also cyber security. The requirement that is being introduced in the Brazilian regulation for substation, inter-substation communication, is that also, in addition to requirement for determinism in this communication or an upper level in possible latency, we also include the monitoring of this external communication and the inclusion of this information on the disturbance recorder, not only in the substation, but at the control center. The transmission of protection signals in a routed network, of course, is something that is difficult to guarantee determinism. So the requirements to guarantee in an upper level, this not only requires the engineering of the traffic of the mainly if you are using MPLS, for example, it is a requirement to define specific rules for the latency and for the prioritization of messaging. Well, these are, of course, under discussion. The idea is at the end of this year, there is a publication and approval of this rule by the national regulating agents. This is expected at the final of this year. Well, this ends my presentation. Thank you so much.